Today we uncover the dark secrets behind a sheriff's secret affair with a teen girl that takes a deadly turn. This hidden relationship leads to a grisly murder, shocking the community and leaving many questions unanswered. Join us as we explore the unsettling details of this case and the shocking fallout that ensued. Becky Caldwell was just 18 when she lost her life. She grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, a town where opportunities were limited and life was challenging. Becky faced a difficult childhood filled with financial hardships and family issues. Her father, Joe Rae Caldwell, struggled with alcohol abuse and had a criminal background, and now he was fighting liver cancer. Becky stepped up as his caregiver, often working long hours to support him. After graduating from Pine Bluff High School in 2011, Becky had no intention of going to college. Instead, she began working as a stripper at the Honey Pot, a local club that attracted a tough crowd. While this job wasn't her ideal path, it helped her make ends meet and offered a glimpse of a better future. At the Honey Pot, Becky met Sheriff Dave Pringles, a married man 34 years older than her. A respected figure in Pine Bluff, he had served as county sheriff for many years. From their first encounter, he was immediately captivated by Becky. Dave began visiting the club often, and soon they started a secret relationship. For Becky, the attention and money he showered on her were a welcome escape from her difficult life. He bought her lavish gifts, assisted with her rent, and even funded her father's visits to the strip club. However, the relationship had its downsides. Dave was possessive and controlling, and while Becky appreciated the material benefits, she started to feel trapped. Despite her growing discomfort, she found it hard to leave, knowing how much influence he had over her life. The situation escalated when Pauleen Pringles, Dave's wife, confronted Becky at the club one night. Suspicious of her husband's actions, Pauleen had followed him to the Honey Pot. In front of the other dancers, she accused Becky of destroying her marriage. Feeling humiliated and frightened, Becky attempted to deny the affair, but Pauleen wasn't swayed. The confrontation deeply unsettled Becky, filling her with shame and guilt. She began to pull away from Dave, but he was determined to keep her in his life. In the days before her death, Becky confided in a close friend about her desire to leave Pine Bluff and start anew, away from the lies that entangled her. She dreamed of moving to a bigger city, like Little Rock or Memphis, hoping to escape her troubled past. Tragically, before she could make that leap, her life was cut short. On January 28, 2012, at about 9:30 a.m., Sheriff Dave Pringles called 911 to report discovering a body in his home office. The victim was 18-year-old Becky Caldwell, his mistress. Dave claimed he found her slumped over his desk, a gun in her hand, with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. He told the 911 operator that it looked like Becky had taken her own life with his service weapon. Becky's body was found inside Dave Pringles' home in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, a quiet suburban neighborhood where such events were rare. The office, a small room filled with law enforcement memorabilia, was located in the back of the house. When first responders arrived, they were greeted by Sheriff Pringles, who seemed upset yet composed. He told the officers that Becky had been dealing with personal issues and likely took her own life. It was Sheriff's Deputy Marcus Burks who first entered the room where Becky's body was located. He later described the scene as unsettling. Becky's body was slouched forward, her head resting on the desk, and a pool of blood had formed on the floor beneath her chair. The sheriff's service revolver lay near her hand. At first glance, it appeared to be a clear suicide. Deputy Burks felt a sense of disbelief. How could someone so young be gone so quickly? Yet, as he examined the room more carefully, he began to notice several unusual details. While there were no signs of a struggle, Deputy Burks noticed visible bruising on Becky's wrists and ligature marks around her ankles, suggesting she may have been restrained before her death. Additionally, the angle of the gunshot didn't seem right to him. It appeared unlikely that Becky could have shot herself from that position. Despite his familiarity with the sheriff, Burks sensed something was off. After documenting the scene and notifying the coroner, he relayed his concerns to the investigative team. This was no ordinary suicide. There was more to the story. The discovery of Becky's body sent shockwaves through Pine Bluff. For those who knew her, it was difficult to accept that the spirited young woman with dreams of a better life had been found dead in the sheriff's home office. As news spread, the town prepared for a lengthy and complex investigation. When Pine Bluff police arrived at Sheriff Dave Pringles' home on January 28, 2012, the scene quickly raised suspicions. Some officers, including Deputy Marcus Burks, suspected there was more to Becky Caldwell's death than a straightforward suicide. However, others were quick to accept the sheriff's explanation that Becky had taken her own life. The investigative team became divided, with some supporting Dave's version of events, while others questioned the narrative due to the strange details. The police promptly called in forensic experts to examine Becky's body. A full autopsy revealed startling details, including bruising around her wrists, indicating that she had likely been restrained before her death. Ligature marks on her ankles supported this theory, further casting doubt on the suicide claim. Even more concerning was the discovery that Becky had engaged in sexual activity shortly before her death. However, forensic testing determined that Becky had not been sexually assaulted, adding another layer of complexity to the case. As the investigation progressed, Sheriff Pringles grew increasingly concerned about the potential fallout. He was a respected figure in Pine Bluff, known for his strict law enforcement approach. The discovery of his 18-year-old mistress dead in his home office was a scandal ready to erupt. To protect his reputation, Dave allegedly used his influence to bribe local media outlets, attempting to suppress coverage of the more troubling aspects of the story. In the days following the incident, news reports were vague, emphasizing Becky's troubled background and implying that her death might have stemmed from personal issues. However, not everyone remained silent. Some local nonprofit blogs and independent Facebook accounts challenged the prevailing narrative, raising questions about the circumstances surrounding her death. These smaller outlets highlighted the unusual circumstances of Becky's death, including her secret relationship with the sheriff. Despite lacking the resources of major newspapers, they played a crucial role in keeping the public informed, even as the official narrative grew murkier. As the investigation progressed, tensions within the police force began to rise. Some officers suspected that the sheriff was concealing information, while others felt compelled to ignore the issues. It became evident that this case would not be easily resolved, and the divide within the department widened as more evidence emerged. Sheriff Dave Pringles had cultivated a reputation in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, as a devout family man and a tough law enforcement officer. He had served as county sheriff for over a decade and was known for his tough stance on crime, frequently delivering public speeches about the importance of family values in law enforcement. As a member of the local First Baptist Church, Dave was often seen every Sunday in the front pew with his wife, Pauleen, and their 3 children. Many in the community admired him for his commitment to his work and his strict adherence to the law. That's why the discovery of Becky Caldwell's body in his home office sent shockwaves through Pine Bluff. When police questioned Dave about her death, he quickly distanced himself from the 18-year-old, maintaining his image as a devoted Christian. He firmly denied any romantic or sexual involvement with Becky. He told investigators that Becky was a stalker who had become obsessed with him for months, even fabricating stories about their relationship. According to Dave, her fixation began after they met briefly during a community outreach event he organized at the local strip club where she worked. He insisted to the police that, as a God-fearing man, he would never cheat on his wife, especially not with someone as young as Becky. He described how Becky had been appearing at his office without clothes and calling him at all hours, but he insisted that he had always rejected her advances. To undermine Becky's credibility, Dave mentioned that he had taken a psychology course at a local community college years earlier. Drawing on what he learned, he claimed he was convinced that Becky was bipolar and potentially dealing with other mental health issues. He further told police that Becky had exhibited signs of being off her rocker and had been suicidal in the months leading up to her death. However, investigators found little to back up his claims. There were no records of Becky receiving treatment for any mental health issues, and the stalker narrative lacked supporting evidence. Becky's friends and co-workers had never heard her talk about stalking Dave or being obsessed with him. While his reputation as a Christian man initially helped him maintain his innocence, inconsistencies in his story began to emerge as the investigation progressed. Eventually, police uncovered a crucial detail that further complicated the case. Pauleen Pringles, Dave's wife, had been in the house at the time of Becky Caldwell's death. Initially not seen as a suspect, this revelation prompted new questions. When investigators confronted her, Pauleen acknowledged that she had been home that night, but claimed she couldn't recall much of what had transpired. Pauleen informed police that she had passed out on the living room rug due to a mix of prescription medications and alcohol. She explained that in recent months, she had started using both legal and illegal drugs to cope with the stress of her husband's infidelity. Pauleen admitted that she had been struggling to manage the emotional impact of Dave's affair with Becky. After years of supporting her husband's career, Pauleen's world shattered when she learned that Dave was involved with a much younger woman. She began taking sleeping pills and anxiety medication prescribed by her doctor, but when those didn't provide enough relief, she sought out other substances. Pauleen confessed to using painkillers from a friend and occasionally mixing them with alcohol to numb the constant feelings of betrayal. The turning point for Pauleen came when she walked in on Dave and Becky together. This moment shattered her, leading to a confrontation with her husband about the affair. Dave pleaded for forgiveness, promising to end the relationship, but Pauleen felt trapped in a marriage that no longer resembled the partnership they once shared. The discovery of Dave's betrayal left Pauleen feeling humiliated and angry, abandoned by the man she had devoted her life to. Despite her intense emotions, she insisted to the police that she had never wished any harm to Becky. In fact, Pauleen had confronted Becky just days before the murder, but she claimed it was not to issue threats. According to her, she visited the strip club where Becky worked to urge her to turn to Christ and end the affair with Dave. Pauleen said she pleaded with Becky to choose a different path, one that wouldn't destroy their family. Although the conversation had been heated, Pauleen insisted it never escalated beyond words. Her admissions led police to question her role in the events of that night. While she depicted herself as a heartbroken wife coping with her husband's infidelity through drugs, her presence in the house and the confrontation with Becky raised suspicions. Investigators speculated whether Pauleen's anger and drug-fueled haze might have led her to act in a way she couldn't remember, but without more evidence, they couldn't definitively link her to the murder. The focus remained on Pauleen, but her drug use and memory lapses complicated efforts to establish a clear timeline of events that night. The investigation took a dramatic turn when police uncovered a troubling history about Sheriff Dave Pringles. While detectives initially focused on Pauleen and the possibility of Becky Caldwell's death being a suicide, they uncovered a shocking twist. Digging deeper into Dave's past, they found evidence suggesting that Becky wasn't the first young woman he had manipulated. In fact, Dave exhibited a troubling pattern of using his position of power to exploit vulnerable women, particularly strippers and sex workers, many of whom were drawn to him due to their difficult circumstances. The first pieces of evidence to emerge were text messages between Dave and several women. Many of these texts were sexually explicit, revealing a pattern of inappropriate relationships. It became clear that Becky wasn't the only one he had been involved with. Investigators discovered phone records revealing dozens of late-night calls to women, some as young as 18 who worked at clubs or were in financial distress. Many of these women had histories of drug use or came from broken homes, making them vulnerable to Dave's manipulative advances. Soon, photos and videos began to surface, further implicating him. These images, found on Dave's personal phone, show him engaging in sexual acts with several women, most of them appearing to be barely out of high school. Detectives also found records of wire transfers and gifts Dave had on these women, further suggesting he had been using his wealth and power to buy their silence or cooperation. One photo in particular showed Dave with Becky having sex in a Walmart bathroom, solidifying the theory that their relationship had been more than just a fling. When confronted with this damning evidence, Dave reacted explosively. He became defensive and angry, accusing the police of fabricating charges against him. He maintained his innocence, insisting that Becky had been stalking him and that he had never taken advantage of anyone. Dave dismissed the text messages and photos as mere horsing around or bad jokes taken out of context. He argued that his relationships with these women were consensual and claimed he was being persecuted because of his position as sheriff. His aggressive outbursts only fueled suspicions among the investigative team. For the police, uncovering this history of exploitation was both shocking and infuriating. Many had known Dave for years, viewing him as a pillar of the community. The realization that he had been abusing his authority to manipulate young, vulnerable women left many officers feeling deeply betrayed. This revelation shifted the entire investigation, prompting detectives to scrutinize Dave's actions in Becky's case more closely. As the inquiry into Becky Caldwell's death deepened, police received multiple reports of a man matching Joe Rae's description seen near the Pringles residence in the days leading up to the murder. Joe Rae's long criminal record raised suspicions about his potential involvement in the case. His arrest history revealed that Joe Rae was a seasoned conman, known for running elaborate schemes to defraud people. He had faced multiple arrests for fraud, identity theft, and various scams. One of his most notorious cons involved posing as a fake charity organizer, convincing people to donate to non-existent causes. He also deceived elderly individuals into signing over their property to him, promising assistance with their financial struggles while leaving them destitute. His criminal history painted a picture of a man skilled in manipulation and deceit. When questioned by police, Joe Rae insisted he had no involvement in Becky's death. He told investigators that he had been near the Pringles house because he was waiting for Dave to take him to a strip club. According to Joe, he and Dave had plans to unwind, and he was simply in the area to catch a ride. He insisted that he wasn't involved in anything illicit and had no knowledge of what had happened to Becky. However, detectives soon uncovered another layer to Joe Rae's deceptions. While he had been telling everyone, including his daughter and their church congregation, that he was suffering from terminal liver cancer, police found no medical records to support this claim. It turned out Joe had fabricated the entire illness to avoid working, relying instead on his daughter and generous donations from their church community. He had duped people into giving him money and support while pretending to fight a disease he didn't have. When confronted with this deception, Joe Rae became defensive and evasive. He denied any wrongdoing, insisting that people had offered him help out of the goodness of their hearts. But the police weren't convinced by his excuses. They pressed him further, highlighting how he had exploited his fabricated cancer diagnosis to evade work and manipulate others. As they laid out the evidence against him, Joe's facade began to crack, revealing his growing unease. For Joe Rae, being exposed as a fraud was deeply humiliating. He had built his life on deception, and now the truth was finally catching up with him. The investigation into Becky Caldwell's death reached its climax when police uncovered crucial evidence that led to the arrest of Dave Pringles for her murder. According to forensic analysis, Becky had been shot at close range with a small-caliber handgun. The angle of the gunshot suggested she had been kneeling or sitting when the fatal shot was fired. Police suspected that Becky had been lured to the Pringles home, perhaps under the pretense of talking things out, only to be shot by Dave in cold blood. The investigation turned when inconsistencies in Dave's alibi emerged alongside forensic evidence linking him to the crime scene. Investigators discovered traces of gunpowder on his clothing and fingerprints on the weapon that matched his. Additionally, surveillance footage from a nearby gas station placed him at the scene during the time frame of Becky's murder. Phone records revealed that Dave had called Becky multiple times the night of her death, contradicting his earlier claims that he hadn't spoken to her in days. As police gathered more evidence, they concluded that Dave had shot Becky in a fit of rage after she threatened to expose their affair to the media and his church community. A man known for his tough stance on crime and his image as a Christian family man, Dave could not afford to have his reputation tarnished. He saw Becky as a threat that needed to be eliminated. When police confronted Dave with the evidence, he reacted with disbelief and defiance. Having spent years crafting a perfect image, the thought that it could all unravel because of one woman infuriated him. During his arrest, Dave maintained his innocence, insisting that Becky had been unstable and had likely taken her own life. However, the physical evidence told a different story, and his protests were met with skepticism. Pauleen, Dave's wife, was devastated by the revelation, grappling with the betrayal and the consequences of her husband's actions. The reality that Dave had killed Becky shattered Pauleen. Already struggling with her own demons and turning to drugs to cope with his infidelity, this revelation was a blow she could never have anticipated. The depth of the betrayal left her reeling, unsure of how to move forward. The man she thought she knew, a devoted husband and father, was now revealed to be a cold-blooded murderer. The arrest of Dave Pringles sent shockwaves through the community. The figure who had once preached about morality and righteousness was now exposed as a killer, leaving everyone to question how well they truly understood him. During his murder trial, Dave Pringles mounted a bold and controversial defense, claiming that Becky Caldwell had taken her own life and that he was being unfairly targeted. His so-called suicide defense argued that Becky had been mentally unstable, citing her history of drug use and emotional turmoil over their alleged affair. Dave insisted that he had not shot Becky, portraying her death as a tragic suicide. Taking the stand in his own defense, Dave attempted to portray himself as a victim of a political conspiracy. At the time of Becky's death, he was running for sheriff and claimed that his opponents were using the case to tarnish his reputation. "I've always been tough on crime," he testified, "and I've always stood up for Christian values. That's why they're coming after me," he insisted. His defense attorney, Mark Tomlinson, argued that the evidence against Dave was circumstantial and that political motives were clouding the case. Prosecutor Michelle Grayson countered this by presenting compelling forensic evidence linking Dave to the crime, including gunshot residue on his clothes and fingerprints on the murder weapon. She emphasized that Dave had a clear motive. Becky was threatening to expose their affair, which would have destroyed his public image. Despite his attempts to sway the jury with claims of being a victim of political sabotage, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for just 2 days before returning with a guilty verdict for second-degree murder. During sentencing, Dave remained stone-faced, but those close to him reported that he was furious, viewing the verdict as a gross injustice. His once promising career in law enforcement was now over, and he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Pauleen, Dave's wife, had mixed emotions about the verdict. While she felt relief that justice had been served for Becky's murder, she also grappled with the reality that the man she had spent years with, despite his infidelity and betrayal, was now heading to prison. The conflicting feelings left her in a state of turmoil, torn between relief and heartbreak. She felt a profound sense of loss, not only for her marriage but for the life she had once envisioned with him. The trial and its outcome shocked their community, as Dave had been a figure many trusted. The man who had preached about Christian values and law enforcement integrity was now behind bars, leaving the town grappling with the betrayal. After the trial, the lives of Dave, Pauleen, and Joe Rae took unexpected turns. Dave Pringles was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for Becky Caldwell's murder. As he began serving his time, he quickly became a pariah among the inmates, facing contempt for his crimes and reputation. Dave's reputation as sheriff was shattered, and he faced a harsh reality in prison, where the code of conduct was unforgiving. Meanwhile, Pauleen was left to pick up the pieces of her life. With Dave gone, she struggled to navigate her grief and confusion alone, trying to rebuild her identity in the wake of the betrayal. Shortly after the trial, Joe Rae re-entered Pauleen's life. He had been a familiar face during the proceedings, claiming to be recovering from cancer and seeking support. His charm and apparent commitment to a Bible-loving Christian lifestyle captivated Pauleen, drawing her into a complicated relationship as she sought comfort and companionship amidst her turmoil. They quickly formed a bond, and Joe moved into Pauleen's home, promising her stability and companionship. However, Joe Rae was a conman at heart. As Pauleen struggled to heal from the trauma of her husband's betrayal and imprisonment, Joe feigned love and affection, manipulating her vulnerability for his own gain. He exploited Pauleen's vulnerability, slowly draining her finances by cleverly siphoning off her life savings. Joe frequently asked for money to help others or claimed he had medical expenses to cover. As the months passed, Pauleen noticed her bank accounts dwindling, but Joe always had a convincing excuse. He claimed he was managing their finances and assured her everything was fine. Desperate for companionship and trust, Pauleen believed him, unaware that she was becoming a victim of yet another betrayal. It wasn't until a neighbor, suspicious of Joe's behavior, alerted the police that the scheme began to unravel. Authorities launched an investigation into Joe Rae's activities and uncovered a trail of deceit, including multiple reports of fraud against him. Once they connected Joe to Pauleen and her missing funds, they arrested him, revealing a web of manipulation that left Pauleen reeling once again. When Joe was taken into custody, Pauleen was left devastated and nearly penniless. The man she had trusted had exploited her at her most vulnerable moment. While she had survived the fallout from her marriage to Dave, she now faced a new battle rebuilding her life from scratch. With the support of friends and community members, Pauleen began to seek therapy and gradually found the strength to reclaim her independence, determined to overcome the betrayals that had marked her recent past. This shocking turn of events served as a powerful reminder to the community about the dangers of trusting too easily. Pauleen's experience became a cautionary tale about love, trust, and the importance of vigilance, particularly in the aftermath of betrayal. The case highlighted how abuse of power can often lurk behind the polished exterior of authority figures. Becky's story endures as a warning and a call for accountability, illustrating that no secret can remain hidden forever. The community grappled with the repercussions, fostering discussions about the importance of transparency and support for those affected by manipulation and violence. Ultimately, both women's stories became intertwined in a narrative that underscored the need for vigilance and justice in the face of abuse.